It started like any ordinary school day, with sunlight streaming through the windows and students chatting in the hallways. But for one teenage boy, the morning would take a sudden, terrifying turn. Without warning, school security and local police arrived, their expressions serious and unreadable, and approached him in the middle of class. Confused, his heart pounding, the teen asked what was happening, why he was being singled out, but no clear answers came. He was told to stand up and follow instructions, and in that moment, he felt the weight of fear settle over him like a heavy blanket. Friends whispered in shock, some trying to call out or protest, but the officers moved quickly and firmly, escorting him out of the classroom. Teachers looked on, stunned and unsure how to respond, feeling helpless as the situation unfolded before their eyes. The boy's mind raced, trying to recall anything that could explain why this was happening, replaying every word and action from the morning, but nothing seemed to justify the sudden arrest. He was handcuffed, not violently, but enough to make him acutely aware of his vulnerability, and lead out of the familiar school building into a world that suddenly felt hostile and unknown. Every step down the hallway amplified his sense of isolation, the familiar walls now seeming cold and threatening. As they drove to the local detention center, the streets looked different to him. Ordinary cars and passing pedestrians now appearing distant and judgmental. He could feel the eyes of his classmates, watching through windows and doorways, their confusion and fear mirroring his own. When he arrived at the detention center, the bright fluorescent lights and echoing corridors only intensified his anxiety. He was placed in a small room with bars and other teenagers, some looking hardened, others equally confused, and he realized how abruptly his ordinary life had been torn apart. Questions ran through his mind relentlessly. Why him? What had he done? And what would happen next? The absence of answers made every sound, every movement around him, feel amplified and threatening. The teachers, the friends, and the few familiar faces he had known and trusted seemed impossibly far away, and the comforting routines of school and home felt like a distant memory. The teen sat on a small bench, hands still tingling from the restraint, heart racing, trying to hold on to composure despite waves of panic and disbelief. Even as he glanced at the officers going about their duties, he could feel a growing uncertainty about the world he had known, realizing that life could change in a single moment, that ordinary days could turn into a nightmare without warning. And in that quiet, tense space, the boy understood that the journey ahead would test every ounce of courage and resilience he had, as the first page of a life-changing ordeal had been written without explanation, leaving him to navigate fear, confusion, and the shocking reality of being powerless in a system that had suddenly decided he was in danger. The teen sat alone in the small, cold room of the detention center, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead as the hours stretched on endlessly. Every time a door creaked or footsteps approached, his heart leaped, only to be met with indifferent faces or curt instructions that offered no explanation. He asked over and over, his voice trembling with fear and frustration, "Why am I here? What did I do?" But no one would answer. Officers moved past him, checking logs or speaking quietly into radios, yet none provided the clarity he desperately needed. Time seemed to slow, each tick of the clock hammering his anxiety deeper into his chest. He tried to recall the day's events, searching for a misstep, a misunderstanding, anything that could explain how his normal school morning had become a nightmare. The walls, once invisible in their familiarity, now felt like they were closing in, gray and unyielding, amplifying the sense of isolation. Every sound, the clang of doors, the shuffle of shoes on linoleum, distant voices echoed like a warning, reminding him that he was powerless in this strange, rigid system. Fear twisted in his stomach, mingling with anger and confusion, and he pressed his palms to his face, wishing for someone, anyone, to explain, to reassure him that he hadn't done something terrible. Minutes dragged into hours, and the waiting became unbearable. each moment stretching longer than the last, a cruel game of uncertainty that gnawed at his mind. He remembered his family, their familiar voices and warmth, and wondered if they knew where he was, if they were worried, if they understood that he had no answers and nowhere to turn. Anxiety pressed heavier with each passing hour, the silence around him a constant, suffocating presence, and he realized that the system he had trusted to be fair and just had abandoned him, leaving him alone to face fear and confusion. Occasionally, other teens would glance at him through bars or across the hall, sharing fleeting expressions of sympathy or uncertainty, but no words came to comfort him. He clutched the edges of the small bench, knees pulled to his chest, wishing he could turn back time to the moments before the arrest, but knew that possibility had vanished. The silence was not just the lack of sound, it was the absence of explanation, the absence of reassurance, the absence of anything human to cling to. Every unanswered question seemed to grow louder in his mind, echoing with each breath he drew, a reminder that the world outside continued as normal while he remained trapped in fear and uncertainty. And yet, amidst the panic and isolation, a small spark of determination began to form, a realization that he could not control what had brought him here, but he could hold on to his courage, his sense of self, and his hope that clarity would come. The hours continued to pass, slow and heavy, each moment a test of patience, resilience, and the human spirit, illustrating the emotional toll of being powerless in a system that offered no answers and no comfort, leaving the teen alone with fear, doubt, and the unnerving weight of silence. While the teen sat alone, consumed by fear and unanswered questions, his parents were thrown into a storm of shock and confusion of their own. Late in the afternoon, a call came that neither had expected, a direct, private phone call from the judge handling their child's case. The tone was formal and unyielding, and immediately they sensed that this was not a routine notification or request for information. The judge did not explain why their son had been arrested or what charges, if any, were being considered. Instead, the conversation was directed almost entirely to the father, who happened to hold the position of the U.S. Attorney General. Words of caution, hushed references to legal sensitivities, and vague mentions of unforeseen complications dominated the brief call, leaving the parents scrambling to understand what was happening. Anger flared alongside fear as they realized that their child's detention was entwined with matters far larger than a simple school incident. Suddenly, the stakes were elevated to a level that made the ordinary rules of parenting and concern feel insufficient. They exchanged glances, each reading the same disbelief and rising panic in the other's eyes, trying to grasp why the system that should protect their child seemed to be acting in secrecy and obfuscation. Questions and scenarios raced through their minds. Had this been a mistake? Was there danger? Why was the judge speaking directly to the father, bypassing usual protocols and leaving them in a haze of confusion? The mother's hands shook as she gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, her mind spinning with images of her terrified child waiting somewhere without understanding what was happening. The father, though trained to manage crises in his professional life, felt a deep, personal helplessness, realizing that his authority and knowledge offered little protection in the face of this opaque and sudden legal action. Together, they began to organize a plan, calling trusted advisors and legal experts, seeking clarity from channels that were normally reliable but now seemed tangled in red tape. While doing so, a heavier realization settled over them. The child's well-being, the family's reputation, and potentially sensitive governmental matters were all intertwined in a situation that demanded both immediate action and careful navigation. Every conversation, every phone call, carried the weight of potential consequences. Yet the singular goal of ensuring their son's safety remained at the forefront. In the quiet moments between calls and decisions, they pictured him alone in that sterile detention room, likely confused, frightened, and wondering why the world had abandoned him. The emotional toll was immediate and intense, a mixture of fear, frustration, and determination that gripped both parents tightly. They knew that their response now would shape the trajectory of their child's ordeal, that the decisions made in these tense hours could affect not only his immediate safety, but the family's integrity and the larger questions of fairness and justice. As they prepared to act, the parents realized that this was no ordinary family crisis. It was a test of resilience, strategy, and love, and that the journey to rescue their son had only just begun, shrouded in mystery, danger, and the unnerving weight of silence and uncertainty as the teen remained confined in the sterile, echoing detention center. His family sprang into action, determined to navigate a situation that seemed increasingly surreal and unfair. The parents immediately contacted top legal experts, assembling a team to examine every aspect of the case and push for transparency, clarity, and the teen's release. Phone calls and emails flew back and forth, legal documents were prepared, and strategies debated, all while the parents balanced the intense emotional strain of not knowing what exactly their son was facing. News of the arrest began to ripple through the local community. Whispered conversations in stores, social media posts, and hushed remarks at school, fueling speculation and tension. Some neighbors expressed concern, others uncertainty, and a few even spread rumors, amplifying the sense that this was no ordinary incident. Inside the detention center, the teen could feel the weight of isolation pressing in on him like a physical force, though he could hear faint sounds of commotion and occasional footsteps in the hall. The lack of information about his circumstances intensified every pang of fear and anxiety. He felt cut off not just from the outside world, but from the very sense of control he had once taken for granted, each passing hour amplifying the unfairness of the situation. And yet, amidst the fear and confusion, small sparks of courage began to form within him. He remembered lessons of perseverance, small moments of self-reliance, and the determination of his parents to fight for him. And these thoughts provided brief, but crucial relief from the oppressive silence. He started to focus on small acts, organizing his thoughts, keeping his composure, and reminding himself that fear alone could not dictate his responses. The teen quietly observed the routines of the detention officers, learning the rhythm of the place, finding subtle ways to maintain his dignity and sense of self while waiting for help. Each brief conversation with a guard, each small acknowledgement from a fellow detainee, became a lifeline, a reminder that he was not entirely powerless. Meanwhile, the family's public efforts began to gain traction. Local reporters cautiously inquired, concerned neighbors voiced support, and the growing attention created pressure on officials to reconsider the secrecy and lack of explanation surrounding the arrest. The teen, though unaware of every step being taken on his behalf, sensed the changing energy, noticing small signs: a slightly less stern guard, a more attentive counselor that hinted at hope. The juxtaposition of fear and emerging courage created a complex emotional landscape, where despair and determination coexisted in equal measure. It became a quiet test of endurance, patience, and mental strength, as the teen learned to navigate isolation, uncertainty, and the slow but deliberate mobilization of support outside. In those hours of confinement, he discovered that courage is not always loud or immediate. Sometimes it grows quietly in the mind and heart, nurtured by the knowledge that loved ones are fighting, that justice may still prevail, and that even in moments of fear and helplessness, small acts of resolve can create the foundation for survival and eventual triumph. By the next morning, the teen's story had begun to spread beyond the walls of the detention center, reaching the ears of journalists, neighbors, and countless people online who were shocked by the sudden and unexplained arrest. Social media buzzed with questions, anger, and speculation as posts, videos, and messages demanded answers, questioning why a teenager could be taken without explanation and why the judge had bypassed normal procedures. Local news channels quickly picked up the story, interviewing neighbors and experts, each segment adding urgency and tension to the unfolding situation. Families, friends, and strangers alike expressed concern, and the teen's name became a symbol of the broader questions about fairness, justice, and transparency in the system. Inside the detention center, he could hear the faint echoes of the outside world phones ringing, news crews gathering, the distant murmur of protest sand. It was both comforting and overwhelming. He realized that people cared, that his situation mattered to others, yet the weight of their expectations pressed heavily on his shoulders. Every news story, every viral post, seemed to increase scrutiny, adding pressure to an already unbearable circumstance. The teen felt eyes on him, even when there was no one in the room, as if the hope and concern of thousands were somehow reaching through the walls to judge, question, or watch his every reaction. He wondered if he could live up to the concern people were showing, if he could remain strong while surrounded by fear, confusion, and uncertainty. The news coverage brought a mixture of relief and anxiety. The knowledge that the world was paying attention offered hope, but it also reminded him that mistakes, missteps, or signs of weakness could be magnified and criticized. He tried to focus on small routines, holding his posture, keeping calm during questioning, and reminding himself that the adults working outside were fighting for him, organizing lawyers, advocacy, and public statements. The teen noticed how the community outside seemed divided. Some were outraged, calling for immediate answers, while others worried about the implications of criticizing authorities or spreading unverified stories. Even so, the growing support created a lifeline, a sense that he was not forgotten, that empathy and concern still existed in the world outside the gray walls of the detention center. Hours passed, and the teen began to feel a quiet strength forming within him, bolstered by the knowledge that people were taking action on his behalf. Yet fear remained, intertwined with the responsibility he felt to remain calm and composed under the watchful eyes of journalists, neighbors, and social media followers. Every sound, every interruption, every distant voice reminded him that his situation was no longer private, that his life had become a story for the world to witness. And in the midst of fear, isolation, and relentless uncertainty, he began to understand the strange power of human attention, empathy, and collective outrage, that even in the darkest moments, the concern and action of others could create hope, bolster courage, and slowly turn despair into the possibility of justice. Days passed in the detention center, and the teen, though still confused and anxious, began to discover a quiet, unexpected strength within himself. At first it was small gestures, picking up stray papers, tidying his corner of the room, or offering a kind word to another teenager who seemed just as frightened and lost. He started writing letters, not only to his parents and friends, but also to anyone who might help him be heard, pouring his fears, questions, and small hopes onto paper in a way that gave him a sense of control in a situation where he otherwise had none. These acts, seemingly minor, became lifelines, a way to hold on to his dignity and humanity even as the system around him seemed indifferent. He began to notice details, the rhythm of the guard's footsteps, the pattern of meals, the way conversations ebbed and flowed in the hallways, and he used that knowledge to anticipate small moments where he could act calmly and with composure, turning uncertainty into a subtle mastery over his environment. Other teens in the center began to watch him too, some cautiously admiring the calm he projected, others silently learning from his patience and courage. Observers, including detention staff, started noticing that, despite the unfair circumstances and the lack of explanation for his arrest, he carried himself with a maturity that seemed beyond his years. He helped others when he could, whether by sharing supplies, offering comfort, or simply listening when someone else needed to speak. In those moments, the teen realized that strength was not measured in resistance or loud defiance, but in the quiet persistence to remain human, kind, and composed in the face of adversity. writing letters, helping others, and keeping his mind focused on hope became ways to reclaim some sense of agency in a world that had taken his freedom, if only temporarily. He began imagining the reunion with his family, picturing their relief, their hugs, and the restoration of the normal life that had been ripped away so suddenly. Those mental images fueled him, reminding him that resilience could grow even in confinement. Over time, the teen understood that his inner strength was a shield, allowing him to withstand fear, anxiety, and isolation, while also showing the world even through subtle actions that courage could exist, even in those who appeared powerless. And though the hours in the detention center were long and each day brought a mixture of boredom, fear, and uncertainty, the teen's quiet determination became a beacon not only for himself but for those around him, creating a ripple effect of calm, dignity, and inspiration. In this confined, pressured environment, he learned a profound lesson, that true courage is not always about fighting or speaking out loud, but about holding on to hope, acting with compassion, and standing firm in one's humanity, even when the world seems determined to strip it away. Through small, intentional acts, the teen began to define himself not by the unfair situation he endured, but by the strength, maturity, and resilience he carried inside, showing that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can shine with quiet brilliance. Outside the detention center, the teen's family came together like never before, their shared fear and determination forging a bond stronger than any challenge they had faced. The parents coordinated tirelessly, splitting duties between contacting lawyers, gathering information, and maintaining constant communication with each other to ensure that no detail was overlooked. Each phone call was an attempt to understand the legal maze they had suddenly been thrust into, to demand clarity from officials who had seemed indifferent or evasive, and to insist that their son be treated fairly and with respect. While navigating bureaucracy, the family also turned to the public, sharing their story with trusted journalists and through carefully crafted statements, hoping to shed light on the injustice their teen was enduring. They spoke about his confusion, fear, and the inexplicable silence he had faced, humanizing him to a community that had begun to follow the story with growing concern. The public response was immediate. Neighbors, friends, and supporters reached out with words of encouragement, offering support in any way they could, and reinforcing the family's determination. Inside the detention center, the teen, though physically separated from his family, felt the ripple of their efforts, sensing that he was not abandoned, that their voices were advocating on his behalf. Every update he received through brief authorized messages or phone calls became a lifeline, a reminder that he was loved and protected, and that he was not facing this ordeal alone. The emotional connection strengthened as parents made the effort to maintain calm, reassure him, and reinforce hope even in the midst of uncertainty. Their solidarity offered him courage, and he began to mirror that determination in his own actions, writing letters, holding on to composure, and treating those around him with care and patience. Together, the family confronted officials, attending meetings, submitting formal requests for transparency, and demanding that the reasons for the arrest be made clear. Each interaction was fraught with tension, as the teen's parents balanced respect for authority with the moral urgency to protect their child, asserting that procedural fairness must not be ignored. In the process, the teen witnessed a new kind of courage, one rooted in love, persistence, and the unwavering belief in justice. The bond between parent and child grew stronger as each day passed. Their collective resolve became both a shield and a source of strength. Even the teen's small gestures of resilience were amplified by the knowledge that his family stood behind him, fighting for his rights and amplifying his voice when he could not. Through sleepless nights, difficult conversations, and the relentless pressure of public scrutiny, the family demonstrated that love and solidarity could overcome fear and isolation. In these moments of unity, the teen learned that courage is not just personal, it is nurtured, reinforced, and magnified through connection with others. That adversity can strengthen the ties of family, and that when loved ones stand together, even the most daunting challenges can begin to feel manageable. By standing side by side, the teen and his family transformed a moment of helplessness into a demonstration of unwavering commitment, showing the profound power of love, advocacy, and solidarity in the face of injustice. After days of relentless effort from the teen's family and legal team, small but meaningful progress began to appear, like light piercing through a long, dark tunnel. Investigations into the arrest were launched, prompted by the public attention, media coverage, and the family's insistence on transparency. Slowly, documents were examined, timelines reconstructed, and procedural steps scrutinized, revealing a series of mistakes, oversights, and failures to follow proper protocol. The teen's parents, who had spent sleepless nights worrying and advocating, felt a mixture of relief and cautious optimism as they learned that these errors might finally work in their favor. Inside the detention center, the teen could sense subtle changes. Too, the questions asked by officials became more deliberate, their tone more measured, and the small interactions with guards and counselors hinted that decisions were being reconsidered. He felt a fragile sense of hope taking root, a feeling that perhaps the unfairness and uncertainty he had endured for so long might soon give way to clarity and resolution. The family's persistence, their moral courage, and their refusal to remain silent had created pressure on a system that initially seemed unyielding, and this realization filled them with a quiet pride, even as tension remained high. Conversations with lawyers revealed that the teen's detention had overlooked basic rights and procedures, giving them legal leverage to challenge the situation effectively. The teen, although still confined, felt a shift within himself as well. The knowledge that his parents and advocates were actively pursuing justice reminded him that he was not powerless, that the system, though flawed, could be influenced by reason, advocacy, and persistence. He began to hold on to small rituals of hope, reading letters from his family, imagining the moment he would be reunited with them, and mentally preparing for the possibility of freedom. Outside, the public and community supporters continued to observe the unfolding events, and their continued attention reinforced the pressure on authorities to act responsibly. Slowly, whispers of the teen's impending release began to circulate, tentative and uncertain, but enough to ignite a sense of cautious optimism in both him and his family. The emotional weight that had burdened them for days began to lift incrementally, replaced by a renewed belief in the power of advocacy, the importance of standing firm in the face of injustice, and the knowledge that even within an imperfect system, persistence, courage, and moral clarity can spark meaningful change. The teen reflected on everything he had endured, the fear, the isolation, the uncertainty, and realized that each struggle had taught him resilience and patience, and that hope could grow even in the darkest corners. This glimmer of justice, fragile though it was, represented more than just the possibility of release. It symbolized the triumph of human determination, the value of ethical action, and the profound impact of family unity, public support, and unwavering courage. In that moment, the teen, his family, and those advocating on his behalf felt a renewed sense of faith that fairness and truth could prevail, setting the stage for the final steps toward freedom, healing, and the restoration of dignity. After days and nights filled with uncertainty, fear, and endless waiting, the moment finally arrived. The teen was released from the detention center. As the heavy doors swung open, a rush of sunlight and fresh air greeted him, a stark contrast to the sterile, confining space he had called home for far too long. His parents were there first, faces filled with relief, tears streaming, and arms outstretched, ready to envelop him in warmth and love. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had followed the story gathered nearby, offering congratulations, hugs, and kind words. Their presence a testament to the power of community support and solidarity. The teen, still processing the intensity of the experience, felt a flood of emotions: relief, joy, disbelief, and an undercurrent of lingering trauma that reminded him of the days spent in confusion and isolation. Each step he took outside the detention center was heavy with the memories of fear, but lighter with hope and the realization that he had endured and survived. Conversations flowed, questions were asked about his well-being, and he tried to explain, in bits and pieces, what it had felt like to be confined without understanding, to live with fear, amplified by silence and uncertainty. The teen's family stood close, guiding him gently, offering reassurances that he was now safe, and helping him navigate the overwhelming attention of supporters and media who had followed the story. Slowly, he began to understand the broader lessons of his ordeal: the value of perseverance, the importance of standing up against unfairness, and the impact that persistence, advocacy, and moral courage can have in influencing a flawed system. The teen realized that even in moments of powerlessness, hope and action could change outcomes, that speaking up and relying on a strong support network were vital tools for justice. While the joy of freedom was overwhelming, there was also a quiet recognition that the experience had left marks, that trauma and fear did not vanish instantly, and that healing would take time, patience, and care. Yet in this mixture of relief and reflection, he felt a growing sense of empowerment, a deeper understanding of his own resilience, and the confidence that he could face challenges with courage in the future. His parents' unwavering support, the lawyer's diligence, and the community's attention had all converged to restore his liberty, and he could not help but feel gratitude and awe at the interconnected efforts that had brought him back. The teen also recognized the responsibility that came with this experience: to be mindful, to learn from it, and to use his voice to advocate for fairness when others might be powerless or unheard. The reunion with family was filled with laughter, tears, and quiet moments of reflection, each one reinforcing the lessons of love, unity, and perseverance. As he walked out into the world, free once more, the teen felt a mixture of triumph and introspection, knowing that, while the ordeal had been harrowing, it had also revealed the extraordinary strength of human compassion, justice, and resilience. And in that moment, the teen began to reclaim not only his freedom, but also a renewed sense of identity, hope, and the understanding that standing firm against injustice, even in the most frightening circumstances, can inspire change and leave a lasting impact on both personal and societal levels. After the whirlwind of fear, confusion, and uncertainty had finally passed, the teen and his family began to understand how profoundly the experience had changed them. What had started as a sudden, unexplained arrest had transformed into a journey of resilience, courage, and awakening to the importance of fairness and transparency in the systems meant to protect people. The teen, now free, carried with him not only the relief of being reunited with his family, but also a deep awareness of the fragility of justice and the strength that can emerge when loved ones and communities act together. His parents, having fought tirelessly on his behalf, became advocates themselves, determined to ensure that no other family would face the same helplessness and fear that had consumed them. They shared their story publicly through interviews, community talks, and written accounts, describing the emotional toll of being powerless, the confusion of navigating legal complexities, and the quiet courage that can grow even in the darkest moments. In recounting their journey, they emphasized the importance of empathy, vigilance, and standing up for fairness, showing that awareness and action can prevent injustice from being repeated. The teen reflected on the lessons he had learned: how fear could be transformed into quiet strength, how resilience could emerge from adversity, and how courage was not only a personal trait, but also something nurtured by the support and solidarity of others. He realized that the ordeal had not only tested him, but had also instilled a profound sense of responsibility, a drive to use his experience to help others and to advocate for systems that valued transparency, fairness, and human dignity. Even as he returned to school and daily life, the memories of detention, the uncertainty, and the support of family and community remained vivid, shaping the way he viewed justice, compassion, and the power of speaking up. The family continued to meet with local organizations, participate in panels about legal reform, and engage in discussions about accountability, using their story as a catalyst for meaningful change. Each conversation, each public statement, carried the weight of their lived experience and reinforced the message that ordinary people, acting with courage and empathy, can make a difference even within flawed systems. The teen found a new voice, one that combined personal reflection with advocacy, sharing insights on resilience, patience, and the importance of trusting one's instincts while seeking help. Over time, the experience became not only a memory of hardship, but also a source of inspiration and purpose, illustrating that life-changing challenges could lead to growth, awareness, and positive impact. The family's bond, strengthened by the ordeal, became a foundation for continued action, showing that love, unity, and moral courage could drive reform and foster hope. The teen understood that while fear and injustice could strike unexpectedly, the response rooted in empathy, determination, and collective action had the power to transform lives, reshape systems, and inspire others to act with integrity. And as he looked back on the journey, from the confusion of sudden arrest to the clarity of restored justice and ongoing advocacy, he recognized the lasting truth: courage, resilience, and solidarity can turn even the most harrowing experiences into lessons that influence the wider world, creating a ripple effect of understanding, awareness, and hope that extends far beyond a single life.